If there is a theme to today's show, it is economic strife and turmoil and desperation in America, but you certainly wouldn't know it watching mainstream media. Our competitors in this time slot over at Morning Joe, who, as I understand, are on right now, going head to head with the DueDissidence boys.
And we do have a lot of overlap with their audience. So.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Looking to chip away at the Morning Joe audience. They went on a little monologue a couple days ago.
Show to be kind of like a kind of hairy Jew version of Morning Joe.
Yeah, Morning Jew.
Morning Jew.
Morning J-O-O. Yeah. But they did a segment. Yeah, exactly. They did a segment the other day that was based on Joe Scarborough's article, which he wrote for The Atlantic magazine. So Joe Scarborough had a piece out in The Atlantic called America is Doing Just Fine. Now, we signed up for the free trial of The Atlantic magazine because we had to read their Orca piece, right? Remember a few weeks back, they put out that ridiculous hit piece on our Orca comrades?
Yes.
We just couldn't not read that. And
Fucking
so we
whale
had to...
haters.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we had to spring for the free trial. I canceled it immediately since I would not be able to live with myself if I gave David Frum's magazine any money.
Fair enough.
Unfortunately, that meant we were not able to read the Morning Joe piece. But thankfully, Mika read some portions of the article on the TV program just a few days ago. So let's hear Joe Scarborough's diagnosis that America is doing just fine and well.
Doing just fine. You argue, quote, Uncle Sam deserves a modern-day Atticus Finch to argue.
You know what I just realized? Because we sped this up for time. Mika Brzezinski's voice sped up. Who does that sound like? It sounds like Hillary, doesn't it?
His case before the American people. And you also
sounds just like her. It doesn't sound like her at normal speed, but when you speed it up just 15%.
A little bit.
There you go. It has that nasally quality now that it's a little sped up.
To argue his case before the American people. And you also write in part, quote, liberals once gained favor among their base by attacking the Pentagon's top brass, but now it is Republican members of Congress who longingly swoon over Russia's manly military while trashing U.S. generals and our men and women in uniform. Those GOP attacks come despite the fact that America's military is more powerful today relative to the rest of the world than at any time since the Second World War.
Okay, just so you know, because she goes on for another minute about the foreign policy stuff, those who are old enough to remember the Iraq War will recognize these lines of attack as literally identical to the lines of attack that the neocon Republican waged against Democrats and liberals at that time. You're blaming America first. You disrespect our military. You know, Joe Biden is leading the charge around the world. I mean, this is a pro-empire, pro-imperialism, pro-military, pro-America, pro-Western, unipolar world rant that he goes on here. This is the so-called left. Right? This is the so-called resistance to the right wing.
Unlike
just
in years
a nakedly
past,
neocon
no longer grouse about the U.S. leading from behind or burrowing itself into a self-defeating America first hole. Instead, the U.S. is first among equals.
We're not going to lead from behind. John Kerry will lead from behind, right?
Yeah.
Same exact language. Scarborough is a neocon GOPer. That's where it comes from.
Well, this is it at this point, and this is what a lot of people are trying to point out. It's very difficult to discuss these things without using terms like right and left. But whenever we get into it, we do get a lot of people who say it's not about right and left. And you know what? You're right. You're right. It isn't. It is about elites versus the people. This is the elite mindset. When they look at Donald Trump, they're not offended by Donald Trump for any rational or reasonable reason. They're angry at him because he doesn't represent this elite consensus. That's all that it's about. That's it. I mean, in terms of damage done to the nation, they embrace George Bush. That tells you everything you need to know. It's not about what Trump did in office or might do in office. It's about the fact that he defies this consensus. They treated Bernie exactly the same way. Bernie's not up there tweeting shit, right?
Right. Exactly.
in a dynamic and expanding NATO alliance that just added a new member with more than 800 miles of Russian border.
Look at how proud.
Oh, yes! We got 800 more miles of Russian border. Take that, Putin! Take that! Who are these fucking people who watch this? It's just amazing, man. I understand if you're a Washington elite and you watch this because this is checking in for your marching orders and your talking points for the day. But if you're just a person watching this and you think there's something in it for you to buy into all this shit, like, how fucking dumb are you?
She says that with such pride. We just added a new member with more than 800 miles of Russian border.
This is what's so disturbing.
Like, you understand we promised not to expand NATO 1 inch east
not
past
1
Germany.
inch east.
And the reason we are on the brink of World War III is because we've done that. And now you're pitching as a bragging point that, oh, we pushed it right up to their border, 800 miles worth, baby. I mean, like you said, who is this for? This is for the elites and the wannabe elites.
Well, that's what's so disturbing and strange about people who are, whatever you want to call them, ostensibly on the left. Because, you know, there's a long history of opposing this kind of thing in that side of the political aisle. And it's just incredible. It's like the pot of boiling water and the frog. You know, it's just so slowly they got turned into Republicans that they don't even realize that they're now traditional right-wing Republicans. I mean, to the right, really, of traditional Republicans. You know, really, we do need to move to a vision of fortunate son, right? It ain't me. It ain't me. I ain't no fortunate one, right? Like, that's the people that are speaking out against war. And increasingly, as yes, many people will rightly point out when we frame things that way on the show, it really is not a right-left thing. It's the people versus the elites who are killing them. I mean, all this ties together. What Savage Joy was just talking about, what's going on in these regions. It's our elites, our institutions are killing us. They're killing us. They need to be overthrown. And a lot of the political ferment right now is trying to figure out how to do that and what you replace it with.
Exactly.
It has provided a devastating response to Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Looking east, the United States has finally begun its pivot to Asia, strengthening military cooperation with Japan, the Philippines, Guam, South Korea, and Australia. The current disruption in U.S.-Sino relations may have less to do with spy balloons and diplomatic missteps than with Xi Jinping's rational fear of being hemmed in by an increasingly muscular U.S. military presence surrounding the South China Sea.
Yeah, this is all wonderful.
What could possibly go wrong?
It's all great stuff there. Yeah, exactly.
What could possibly go wrong with making the Chinese really nervous about our presence in their territory? And why are we there anyway?
Right.
What are we doing there?
Right.
What does the average American get out of that?
We're doing great, baby. We're the best. We're taking over the world.
Well, meanwhile, they can't recruit enough people to crew the military.
Right.
Right. Like people don't want to join. It's partly that it's a nation of fat fucks, and no, you can't do whatever you want at any size. Try running the military obstacle course at 300 pounds. If you could do it at any size, believe me, they're desperate enough now. They'd take you. You can't. So you have that element, but you also, I was reading an interesting article the other day where they were talking about how, the military is studying this, and people that would be considered influencers, meaning uncles, fathers who served, are no longer telling the younger generation in their family to serve. They're telling them not to serve.
Well, yeah, because they don't want to go to the South China Sea. What do they got to go to the South China Sea for? What do we need to be there? What do we need to give years of our lives for that for? Right. There's no morale. Exactly.
There's no morale because there's no faith in the people who are in charge of the military.
Right. There's no sense that there's a just mission, right? It's this shit.
Right.
Diplomatic overtures toward India were likewise calculated to contain China's regional ambitions. Childhood poverty has dropped to the lowest level on record. Teenage pregnancy has done the same. The U.S. dollar has experienced generational highs over the past year. Unemployment recently hit a 54-year low. The number of job openings this past year also hit record highs.
Okay, this is another elite narrative. Russell has some figures about child poverty, but before I toss to him for that, the unemployment thing is largely, not entirely, obviously, but largely a red herring. Because as we're going to cover later in the show, what matters more than the unemployment rate is how much money people are getting paid on the job. Right? I mean, this is a lot like George W. Bush. Remember when that woman...
I mean, under the Romans, I think you had almost a 0% unemployment rate, but most of them were galley slaves.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Nobody was unemployed. Right?
Remember when George Bush had that woman come? I worked 3 jobs. He's like, that's fantastic. That's wonderful.
Great. Let's pause for a second. Isn't that so American?
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, right.
That's American.
That's American. Work 3 jobs, could barely get by. So again, this emphasis on unemployment, both parties are obviously guilty of this because neither party gives a shit about working people. But this overemphasis on that as opposed to wages, benefits, security, savings, right? All those numbers, bad, and worse. But that's not what gets eyeballs in outlets like this. Now, in terms of childhood poverty, Russell did a little quick last-minute research bit on this before we went on. Do you have those handy?
It just didn't sound right to me. I was like, hang on, we have historically low child poverty? Well, not according to the Children's Defense Fund, not to be confused with RFK's outlet. That's a different thing. According to them, children remain the poorest age group in America, with children of color, children under 5, children of single mothers, and children in the South suffering from the highest poverty rates. 2 years since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, child poverty remains a paralyzing problem. Skipping ahead, although the number of children living in poverty has fallen from 11.6 to 11.1 million between 20 and 2021, in the final tally, the pandemic managed to push more than 1 million children over the threshold into poverty. Among the 74 million children living in the United States, 11 million live in poverty. 1 in 6 children under 5, that's 3 million children, were poor, the highest rate of any age group. The pandemic forced children already in poverty even deeper into poverty. Almost half, 47% of all children living in poverty, live in severe or extreme poverty, a number which rose from 4.5 million before the pandemic to 5.5 million in 2021. So I don't know what they're talking about because I don't see what would have happened. They cut the child tax credit. So why would there be less child poverty now? There should be more.
Yeah, it cut in half, and then it almost doubled back to its original rate. Yeah.
The South, home to 47% of children in our country who live in poverty, experiences the highest child poverty rates, with 1 in 5 children living in poverty. 9 million children faced hunger and food insecurity. 4 million children lived without health insurance. So, hey, maybe that's why Americans don't realize how great things are.
Right.
Maybe that's part of it. Maybe, maybe all of these people seeing children living in poverty connect that to quality of life. Right. Maybe
Exactly.
Maybe they see that and they're not like, well, but hang on, man, we've really got China scared.
We added 800 Russian miles of NATO border. Isn't
There's
that
that.
There's that. We're on the way.
Overall,
The
US
Johnson boy has rickets again, but God damn it, those Chinese bastards are quaking in their boots.
economy continues to surge forward despite economists' dire predictions. America's GDP grew to $25 trillion last year. Texas has a bigger economy than Russia, and although California is routinely rebuked by right-wing critics, it has the 4th strongest economy in the world, stronger than Britain's, France's, Canada's, or India's. The United States and its European allies collectively run an economic machine that doubles China's stagnating output.
Okay, all of that is to say that rich people are doing well. That's all that
Exactly. Exactly.
That does not mean
exactly.
America's doing
stronger
well.
for who?
Right.
Stronger
Exactly.
for who? I mean, if you have this enormous wealth generation and all the wealth is going to 6 people and you got theoretically 1 million people, what the fuck does that mean? Is that a great economy? Is that an economy that's doing well? I mean, technically it's generating a lot of GDP, but who's benefiting from it?
Despite record debt levels, a stubborn case of inflation, and other structural challenges, American capitalism continues to drive and dominate the world economy.
Oh, good.
A fulsome defense of Uncle Sam often requires dialectical
She's so
thinking.
excited.
I know.
But remember this. Even with all of its failings, America has fed and freed more human beings than any other country in history. And despite the blather that cable news hosts spit at you daily, your country is doing pretty damn well.
There you go.
Yeah, freed those Iraqis for sure.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you, Mika, for reading that for us.
Please clap.